Christakis article in Atlantic Monthly was really interesting because, and Scott and Sarah talk about it at the end of the lockdown drill video, which is the emotional effect that having a drill has on kids. And it was one of the things that you and I talked about when you were on site helping us film. And as you pointed out, so many kids have done these drills before. And so part of it is, okay, they're used to it, maybe habituated to it. And, we'd hope that school officials had, if that's where they did the lockdown drill, framed it in a way that helps kids understand in the same way that they might frame a fire drill. We don't expect the school to burn down, but we want to make sure that things proceed in an orderly fashion if we do need to, move.
And in certain geographic areas of the country, you not only get fire drills, you get earthquake drills.
Sure.
Very prevalent in California. So kids in certain areas are exposed to this training beforehand. But I do think the article made a nice point in saying, announce your practice drill. So,
exactly.
Announce it, and then the teachers can explain what's going to happen. At the same time, they can reinforce that this is for the kids' safety. We want you to be safe, that kind of thing. And then do the drill. Don't pull it as a big surprise.
Right. And I also think
fire drill.
Exactly. And, as a clinical psychologist, and I hope have an opportunity to kind of repeat this during the official segment of the webinar. But one thing that I was excited to talk to you about is being sensitive to kids' developmental ages. And, if there's, or stage of development, if there's one thing that makes us all anxious, it's the unknown. And so, for example, if you're in California and you're in kindergarten or first grade or preschool or third grade, and for safety preparedness sake, there is an earthquake drill, those kids, I think, will be far less anxious, not only if it's framed as this is a way to stay safe, but also learn something about earthquakes. And one of the things to learn is if you know what to do, then there's, vastly decreased chance of injury. And earthquakes are very unusual, but they do happen. Of course, we have many more earthquakes, thank goodness, than we do sort of active shooter incidents. But it's the provision of information that I think all the articles, including Christakis's, didn't mention. And they're raising an important point, which is how these drills are explained, as you taught me, is so important. And the piece I would add is, let's talk about conflict resolution so that people can see it so very rarely comes to something violent. Or let's talk about tectonic plate shifting, and even the youngest kids can understand this is a really unusual thing. You put on a helmet when you get up to bat in Little League, not because you expect to be beamed, in the noggin, but because you want to
protect yourself. Yeah, there's a chance that could happen. You want to protect yourself.
Yeah, but if you're a batter, think of how anxious you would be if you thought, well, most of the time, the pitcher throws the ball at the batter's head, right? So it's the frequency, which I think is a discussion of that was missing from those. Maybe I should write an article for the Atlantic Monthly.
There you go. And in the earthquake topic, you're also teaching kids something they can use at home, because earthquakes occur when you're home. So find your places to shelter in your doorways, underneath substantial furniture. That's something you translate to take home. Same with the fire drills and the fire safety things. If something occurs in your home, you want to be able to get out. We teach you that at school to get out of the school. You need to also use that at home to get out of your home should something happen. So those things translate. And this is just another preparedness tool for the kids to have in their little toolkit as they mature. Yes, dealing with younger kids, I think you're looking at shepherding them
Yeah,
That's
yeah,
just, you have to gather them and take care of them that way, because they don't have the intellectual development to look after themselves. But as
good
they go
point.
into junior high and into senior high,
Right,
then they become responsible young adults.
right, right.
And there's
Well,
the level
let's
of
do
care
this.
they can look after themselves.
Yes, and that's a really good point. And for the 100 or so people who have joined us today, we'll be recapping some of the things that we just said, but I'm going to just pause for a moment here. My video, don't do anything to yours, and then we'll start. All right, well, welcome everybody. It's 1 o'clock and it's time to start this month's webinar, which is on lockdown drills. My name is Chris Thurber. I'm the co-founder of Expert Online Training with my friend Evan Helte. Expert Online Training is host to more than 150 educational videos that are designed to prepare directors and primarily staff who are working at summer youth programs, day camps, overnight camps, parks and rec departments, and summer schools for the important task of caring for and setting a good example for the young people they serve. So we are grateful to Expert Online Training for arranging this webinar series. We offer one a month, and typically we're blessed with a panelist to help us discuss an important topic in youth leadership. Today we're joined by Lee Geiling, who is a risk management specialist and safety officer at K&K Insurance. And in a minute, Lee, I'll let you say just a bit more about what you do, and then we'll dive into today's topic. Our webinars are 45 minutes, and I expect that we'll have more questions after the webinar for anyone who wasn't able to attend live. Although they won't be able to ask questions in the chat room, certainly they'll be able to watch the recording. So I'll open up the chat room and encourage people to type their questions in if they didn't submit them ahead of time. But Lee, tell us a little bit about yourself, and in particular, the qualifications you have to have advised Expert Online Training on the creation of one of our newest videos, which is lockdown drills. So welcome, and I'll turn the floor to you for a minute.
Certainly. And thank you for asking me, Chris. I certainly appreciate being asked. In my role at K&K, K&K is a large specialty risk insurer. If you see it on television Saturday or Sunday, you visit it as a vacation activity or you engage in it as a recreational activity, chances are K&K is touching that product, touching that area. And we are the largest insurer of summer camps in the United States. So in my role at K&K, I am a field representative where I go out and I look at certain risks that we insure. And I've been to a number of summer camps, very, very large camps, resident camps, day camps. And what we try and do is impart the knowledge that I have. I have a fire service background, an emergency services background, as well as a degree in that. And I try and translate that into the camp space to allow them to benefit from some of the K&K's knowledge. I extend things to them like best practices that we see, that we encourage camps to follow. I learn something every day when I go to the camps. And what is being placed out there for the youth, I always tell people when I leave, I didn't see anybody that was not smiling, not having a good time. So what your folks are doing is those camps are providing a great service for kids, giving them an outdoor experience, doing all sorts of activities that they wouldn't normally do. But in my role, I'm looking to make those folks as safe as possible. I don't want the buildings to burn down. I don't want any kids to be hurt by anything. So I'm looking at physical hazards, but I'm also looking at program hazards. And we do have some incidents occur in our book of business. And as those claims come across my desk, I impart that knowledge to the camps I'm visiting so it doesn't happen again. Mm-hmm. So that's our kind of role, or my type of role there at K&K, to assist the clients in identifying exposures to loss, offering risk treatment options, which are solutions to those things, and also relaying things that may have happened in the industry that are pertinent to them. So well, that's fantastic. In a nutshell, that's what we do.
Yeah, no, and I was grateful to have met you a couple of years ago when I visited K&K headquarters, because you advised us on another set of videos that relates to your area of expertise. And I remember gathering with other insurance executives, and they said, Chris, we like the videos on expert online training, and we see, our favorite ones in the safety category on prevention of abuse and active lifeguarding and things like that. But gosh, you got to make a video on common sense. And I remember turning to you at lunch and saying, what do people mean by common sense? And you said, well, let me tell you what the most common types of thinking mistakes people make. And that led to the video series, Look Before You Leap. So if what Lee just said to everyone is of interest to you, and I think if you are involved in a youth program, it should be, please spend some time checking out the Look Before You Leap series, because it's born of Lee's experience seeing what incidents happen and learning what could prevent them. And Lee, I can't think of a more important career that someone could have than what it is that you do. Surely, insurance is partly designed to compensate for some kind of loss, but you're far more interested in preventing those losses, whether it's an injury or an accident, from happening in the first place. So
that's correct.
There's been a lot of dialogue on different websites and blogs, and certainly on the Expert Online Training Facebook and Twitter feed about today's topic, lockdown drills. And as you and I talked about in the moments before the webinar, it's so important to be prepared for an emergency. And at the same time, again, whether that's an earthquake or a fire or some kind of intruder, I think that youth development professionals understand the notion of preparedness, but a lot of the questions that I received prior to today's webinar really focused on the topography of a lot of camps. That is to say, whether it's a day camp or an overnight camp or a Parks and Rec department, the campus, as it were, is fairly open. So before we get into some of the principles that apply broadly to all different programs, and some of the things that Scott Arizala and Sarah Kurtz-McKinnon talk about as hosts of the EOT video lockdown drills, could you address some of the most important considerations for a facility that is fairly open, rural or urban, but I suppose it happens more in rural settings, and just educate us a little bit about what's special or different about those open settings?
Certainly. And we recognize that in the camp industry that you do have very large campuses where your campers are staying and engaging in activities.
Yeah.
And some of the things that we look for in those areas are, we want the facility to be secure. We want you to know who is on your facility, who belongs on your facility, and more importantly, who does not belong on your facility. So it sort of starts at the gates, if you have them at your facility, that someone is screening the people that are coming onto your camp, that anybody who's a vendor that's coming on checks in, anybody who's coming to pick someone up checks in, that you have a security system in place that's looking after your campers. And what we want in that aspect is, if someone appears at your camp and they are not wearing your official guest sticker, your guest lanyard, your guest tag, whatever, someone from your facility needs to engage them and say, who are you and why are you here? And then direct them to the proper place. And that is critical to maintaining the integrity of your entire camp, just by keeping the wrong people out, folks that don't belong here.
Yeah, so just to clarify then, the gate is the sort of the natural place for people to stop, and yet there may not be gates around the entire facility. So it's really a two-part procedure here that people should think about. One is welcoming people who do arrive at the gate and trying to understand who they are and what their business is, at your facility, whether they are the bread delivery person or, a parent or somebody else, maybe a prospective family. And once you've vetted them, and the vetting ranges all the way from asking for their driver's license and running a background check instantaneously on that document and then giving it back to them with the badge, the lanyard, the sticker, as you said, to some things which are a lot less formal, sort of, hi, welcome, here's the button you can put on. So everybody should consider whether they want to upgrade the vetting and identification visually of their visitors.
One of the things I look for, Chris, when I go to the camps are, how is the camp staff attired? Are they wearing identifiable shirts? Are they wearing a lanyard with a badge on? I want it for two reasons. I want to be able to identify staff and know who's who, but at the same time, if someone is having a problem at the camp and their counselor is not available or not close to them, if they can look around and see an individual in that staff shirt, they can go to that person for assistance. So it does things in two manners. For me, it identifies who's who in the camp, who's doing their jobs, and also it allows someone who is not at their normal position to access a responsible person if there is a problem. So that's all on your security standards.
And then it sounds like there's a third piece too, which, sorry to interrupt, but you also mentioned, in addition to the vetting and the identification of guests, the third piece, which is critical, is you do need to train your staff to walk up to someone who isn't a known staff member or an identifiable visitor and say, hi, I'm Chris Thurber. It's nice to meet you. Could you tell me why you're here? And, they should have a good answer, and hopefully their badge or their lanyard is in their pocket. But without training the staff to approach people who are not easily identified as either their colleague or an official visitor, you're leaving out an important piece of that kind of, entryway, whether it's a gate or it's. And then what about the periphery? What about the sort of non-gate areas? Does the system you just described in some form or another also take care of that?
It will. It's very helpful that you are, again, identifying people who belong at your camp. Because you can get to certain areas by crossing through woods, coming across a body of water, and you want to be aware that people are approaching your facility or coming on your facility different ways, that when you see someone coming out of the woods or coming across a body of water, that should sort of set a little alarm off in your staff's head as to who is this person and why are they not coming into the camp in the normal manner. So again, that's someone where you would take that opportunity to approach them in a non-threatening manner and ask if you can assist them. Maybe they're lost or whatever, or maybe they're coming into the camp to use the facilities surreptitiously. You want to have someone be able to go over and, as you said, say, why are you here? May I help you? And identify what that person's role is and why they're there. You also mentioned the fact that when you come to certain camps, and I've had this happen a number of times, and I go through it, where I must show my driver's license at the office. And they run me through something called the Raptor system. And what that is sort of an instantaneous criminal background check, so that they know the person coming on this camp should come on the camp. Or maybe it's someone that you don't exactly want on your facility. You can deal with them in your office and send them on their way that way.
Right.
It's very effective and it's instantaneous.
So that's a great, and again, in the video lockdown drills, we show a couple of examples of the greeting, at the gate, the provision of guest lanyard, and you're adding a really important component, which is the training of the staff to approach that person. So let's now move to what would happen, and again, the details of how a particular facility implements their lockdown drill or that type of emergency action plan will vary from facility to facility. And on one of the Facebook pages where people were discussing lockdown drills at camps, several people made the point that not only is there a lot of individual variation, but the way that the American Camp Association describes that accreditation standard is similar to the way it describes other standards insofar as it's broad, and it leaves individual owners and directors with some latitude about how best to implement some of the things we're talking about today. So, we've covered a bit of the identification. Maybe you've got more to say about identification of a threat, and if so, say that first. But then, what happens after that? What the sort of alert or communication piece? I'd love to hear about.
And let me say that we as a company feel that these lockdown drills are very important, and we look at them in the same way we would fire training, fire drills, that type of thing. They have the impact to make a camper maybe a little more aware of what's going on. At the same time, we don't want to scare the campers when we're doing these drills. I think the drill should be announced so that the kids know, campers know what's going to go on, so that they're not afraid, they're not frightened, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
One of the things I learned this summer when you and I were together was that when we started to talk about lockdowns to campers, they sort of said, "Oh yeah, we know this. We get this training in school," and that was a big thing for me. In that, yeah. Wow, now I really don't have to be afraid that I'm going to scare these kids or put something into their heads that is not conducive to the nice camp atmosphere that you're looking for. But the kids had already had this exposure. They'd already been trained how to do this in their educational environment. So what we taught them at the camp was another way to look at this lockdown drill and another way to keep themselves safe.
Right.
And it went through the drills. There was no problems with them. We didn't have anybody crying. There was nobody scared. It went as well as could be expected. And I think that's something to take into consideration, that your staff, when you train them, you can tell them you're not scaring these kids. You're reinforcing something they may have had in their educational environment here in our camp environment. And you can reference that. You see, in your school environment, you may be doing X, Y, Z. Here in our camp, this is what we're going to do. So I don't think you have to worry about scaring your campers with this type of training. And on the parental side,
important. Yeah, if I can interrupt once again to just say, expand a little bit from the point of view of, father, but more importantly for this particular issue, a psychologist. One would hope that not only having done it before at a school has habituated young participants to the experience, but also that school personnel would have explained the rationale, answered questions. As you said, the drill is announced. And, I think a really essential piece is for the camp staff to consider what is the maturity level or developmental level of the young people we're serving, and what questions might they have, and give the young participants an opportunity, maybe the day before, as you have announced that tomorrow we're going to do this drill, ask questions, be available to ask questions afterwards, and perhaps most importantly, to make it clear that whether you're doing a fire drill, a lockdown drill, we talked earlier about in California and other places that are prone to earthquakes, earthquake drills. I was born in Kansas. We did tornado drills. That it's a very low frequency event. So I wouldn't want a young person to walk away from doing a lockdown drill thinking this could happen at any moment, because of course it's tragic when it happens and it makes headlines, and we want to keep our young participants as safe as possible in the unlikely event that were to happen at our facility. But so important to let them know the safety measures that the camp is taking. That's reassuring. Also, that the events themselves are incredibly rare. That's reassuring. and that what you're teaching them to do is what we know so far about how to keep young people and the adults who are caring for them as safe as possible. It's of course incredibly difficult to do research on this topic. You can only do it after something happens, and fortunately it doesn't happen very often. But the procedures that we have in place, and you'll get to describing those in a little bit more detail, are the best we have now. And just because there aren't enormous national studies with huge sample sizes looking at the effectiveness or mortality rates of one technique versus another, doesn't mean we shouldn't be learning everything we can from the few incidents that have occurred and providing in context that's developmentally appropriate to the kids, instruction on what our drill is. So that was a long aside, but I'll let you keep going with what happens next.
You're absolutely right, Chris. This is always evolving. We learn something from every incident, and we translate that going forward into education and applying what we've learned from different incidents. Looking at those, an active shooter event is no longer something where you can say it'll never happen to me. You just can't do that anymore. You have to be prepared because it could happen. But in this camp environment, you're right. You don't want to scare the kids and say, hey, tomorrow there may be a big emergency on campus. You just want to have the information to your staff and your campers of this is what we would do. The one thing I will mention here is when you're training your staff members, when they get the training of what to do during an active shooter drill, when the word comes out that there is an intruder on your campus, they need to take action immediately. They can't decide to play another inning of baseball or run a couple more soccer games, whatever. They need to take their action specifically and quickly so that they have the opportunity to protect the kids that they're looking after.
Yeah, I think you told me that the average duration of an incident like this is something like 12 seconds?
12 minutes.
12 minutes. That makes a lot more sense.
The incident start to finish is 12 minutes. And that's one of the things that they've learned in these studies. The other thing that we're seeing and what's occurring now is there's more than just run, hide, fight. Now, after the fight concept is talked about, we're talking about some reaction and some response. If someone is injured, what do you do for that person? There's some national training programs out now called Stop the Bleed, that they are looking at these types of incidents, specifically a mass casualty incident with significant injuries, and this is what we're going to do to help those people who have become injured. Because you mentioned it earlier, the camps in a rural setting, they may be being served by a volunteer fire department. I was a volunteer for a number of years, and you're coming from your home, you're getting to the station, you're getting your equipment, and you're responding. All that takes time. And the fact that we have to travel a distance from our station to your camp, maybe over challenging roads, back roads, 2-lane things, it takes a little while. So you want to have your staff aware that help is coming, and law enforcement will probably get there before fire and EMS, but that help is not coming instantaneously. So
it's important that people understand. Oh, I'm sorry, go ahead. The help is not going to get there instantaneously.
Right. So having people in your camp react to these types of incidents very rapidly and appropriately, and sheltering the kids and looking out for them that way is important. But at the same time, afterwards, should something occur that was traumatic to someone, what do I do now? I can't just let that person lay on the ground. I need to be able to do something for them.
And that helps answer. Yeah, that helps answer the question, as I said, that a lot of people posed about being in a rural setting. So one thing is open, whether you're in a rural or open setting, and you explain that to us. Another is, the distance from emergency medical services. I think you also highlighted something that's essential for us to share with the young people we serve as youth development professionals, and that is that, yes, we're going to do a drill, and here's the purpose, and here's the rationale, and these are very low frequency events. But here's another piece that you highlighted, which is something to make explicit. Just as the adults are supervising and in charge when we play baseball or swim, the adults are also going to guide you and provide leadership during the drill. So not to be guilty of adultification of children, demanding a kind of complex decision-making or skill set that's developmentally inappropriate. But of course, we're not asking the kids to do anything more in these lockdown drills than we ask them to do throughout the day. For example, walk over here, or follow me, or sit down, or be quiet. So when you understand as a young person that, okay, I'm not being asked to put out the fire or to assemble everybody or understand this drill from A to Z, including what the communication plan is. Again, I think it lowers anxiety and lowers parents' anxiety when they discover, oh, just like at school, my camp also has its own customized, stay as safe as possible, know what to do in these first 12 minutes, lockdown drill. You also mentioned something that Scott and Sarah highlight in the EOT video, which is coordination with local emergency services, police, fire, EMTs. Can you say a little bit more about how, regardless of whether you're urban, rural, suburban, open, closed, campus, day, resident, parks and rec, what is the importance of, in the spring, or maybe even now in the winter, calling the local, fire, police, EMS, to talk with them about your lockdown drill or plan as it currently exists and getting their input? Why would that be helpful?
It's very important for two reasons. Number one, the fire service, law enforcement, and EMS, they may have certain information that you do not have access to. There's certain things that are occurring now that the National Fire Protection Association has come out with a active shooter preparedness, response, and recovery program. And it'll become code at some point that this is what we were looking to do. So the fire service guys will know this type of thing, and they'll be able to apply that knowledge to your plan. And these guys have expertise. You want them on your side. I can tell you from experience that if I know you and I show up at your emergency, I say, hey, Chris, what do we have? What do you need me to do? Versus, I need to get past this guy so that I can do my job. You're either part of the team or you are someone who I have to deal with as an incident commander at the time of the emergency. So if you have that relationship and people know you, the emergency goes, I'll say, a lot smoother. Law enforcement, they're always learning from the FBI, a couple of the other agencies that are looking after these active shooter situations, Homeland Security and people like that. They're up to the minute on what's going on. So if you have them as a cooperative partner and you encourage them to come out to your camp every once in a while so they know the roads, they know what the terrain is, they know what activities are going on, those people become your partner, and don't overlook them as people who can assist you making your plans.
Right,
EMS
so they're lending their expertise. Yeah, they're lending their expertise, but you also are teaching them some of your expertise about this is where we usually are, or we have this other access road, or thanks for pointing it out. I guess we're missing clear all-season signage for some of the most important places where we would want you to be able to drive an ambulance or something like that.
Yeah, these folks, they're looking to participate in these types of things. I've never seen anybody who says, I don't want to help you plan for an emergency. They want to have the best response possible. Right. Okay. They're coming to your facility to help. So
and it doesn't cost anything, right?
Yeah, the more they know about it, the better off they are.
Okay, it's free.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Law enforcement people, your sheriff's department, state police, they may even be able to come out and help you when you're training your people. Hearing something from a uniformed individual sometimes goes a little bit longer than just hearing it from the person who you've been hearing things from for the first 3 days. They will have a certain level of expertise and can lay a level of gravity on that. But you're right, that expertise in their people. Go ahead.
Okay. Would you do the same thing, Lee, if you were a program that some of the time or all the time functioned as a user group? In other words, typical example would be we're bringing 50 kids to the beach, or we are a day camp, and every day we operate in a public facility. We don't have our own separate facility. We're always in this national park, or we're always in this public space. What should happen then? Can you still coordinate with emergency services in your area?
Absolutely. I see a lot of day camps that operate out of very large church campuses.
Okay.
And one of the facilities that has been targeted by some individuals for mayhem and shootings are religious areas, are churches. So the churches have come forward and they said, what can we do to protect our congregations? Okay. The churches that you are using as your daycare center may have an active shooter protocol in place. And you say, how can I envelop myself into your program that you already have in place? And the church should say, we shelter areas, we lock doors, we know who's calling 911 no matter what day of the week it is. And then you can integrate your program with that, bringing kids indoors or moving them away. There's a lot of things that go on. Yeah, so
when presumably somebody is a user group at a facility, they've signed an agreement with that facility, and they need to find out what is the existing plan, and they might even be able to add some sort of creative ideas, or sounds like a good plan, but our group is much bigger or much smaller. And even
You're correct, Chris.
Yeah.
You're correct. And one of the things you have to think about now is not only someone coming on your facility to do harm, but what if someone has come to the bank next door to the church where your day camp is? What if someone has come to the Walmart where your church is located next to, and all of a sudden law enforcement shows up and says, we need you to go on lockdown right now. You have to have a program in place to gather your folks, get them in a secure location, because law enforcement will expect that from you. They may offer some direction, but you're the person controlling the campers, controlling that campus, and if they ask you to put someone in lockdown, put the facility in lockdown, you need to do that. There's no question.
So let's talk about that. Let's talk about that control for a minute. And we, when you came on site this summer and were a consultant for us as we filmed the video lockdown drills, we spoke about scatter versus huddle, and we did indoor and outdoor scenarios. If you could first talk a little bit about sort of pros and cons of being in a group versus scatter, which I think people have heard of, and then move to talking about what would be different indoors versus outdoors. That'd be fantastic. And before you do that, somebody wanted a reminder of the software or the program for scanning driver's licenses. Could you state that again?
It's called the Raptor system.
The Raptor system. Okay.
Like the bird, R-A-P-T-E-R. Ours are Robert A. Adam P. Paul, T-E-R.
Okay.
Very effective, and it allows you to screen those people that are coming on your facility, and you know who's coming. It's a good tool.
All right, so talk a little bit about huddling in a group versus having a protocol where kids and staff spread out or scatter.
Right. And there's two schools of thought right now, and the one school of thought that's becoming more prevalent is the fact that you don't want to present a shooter with a huge target of people. That you want to leave the building or move away in your facility. Again, once you've identified that you have an intruder, what they look like, the direction they're traveling, what they may be doing, and you communicate that to your staff, Then it's the choice to move away. If you're outdoors, you can move away from the area where the person is going on. Shelter them, move like a herd of ducks. Just kind of move them over into a different area. You may be able to observe and move to different places to get them away. A lot of the drills and a lot of the new plans coming out are telling office workers, other people, to leave the building as quickly as possible, to get away like it's a fire. Use your exits.
Yeah.
If you do not have that opportunity and you must shelter in place, then that's where you take the steps of locking the doors of the room that you've entered. Turn off the lights, make no sounds, silence your cell phones, and wait it out. You have to take some type of action, again, decisively. If you decide to move your group of people away and out on your campus, continue to do that. Now, if you go to a certain area, and I've been to some very large camps in Kansas that have fantastic tornado shelters. And these things are bomb-proof.
Oh, yeah. Are they the ones that look like Quonset huts, sort of? Yeah.
Oh, Chris, there's all kinds. Reinforced concrete, very, very strong. If you designate that as a rally point or a point where your staff takes their campers to, you're essentially locking them in a vault. No one's getting in there. So, choosing the room or choosing the area where you go to shelter your people is critical also.
Okay.
It's unfortunate you have to talk about that these days, but you do have to realize that a large number of people becomes a large number of targets for somebody.
Right.
In the video, we show the shooter's eye. We show the way it would look for someone who was the shooter to come into a building. He encounters empty rooms. Nothing for him to do here. Nothing for him to see here. You show him coming into the larger activity room. It's dark. There's a bunch of chairs in the corner. Nothing is seen. Well, behind those chairs is a group of kids that we're sheltering. But the shooter doesn't see that. But he's intent on going somewhere else to do harm. So when you move people into these environments where they're in a secure room or secure area, also take some other steps to camouflage them, if you will, with what's available in the room to shield them from anybody seeing them, maybe deflect a bullet, who knows, but take those extra steps. And again, your plan is custom to your camp. You know your camp best. You know what facilities are available in the camp that can act as shelter. You know in your camp where I can rapidly move people away and down a hill that's out of the way of these people who may be walking along your waterfront or something like that. You take those into consideration when you're making your plan. The plan shouldn't be so rigid that your counselors can only do certain things. The counselors need to be able to be flexible. Okay, I've gotten the alert that there's an intruder. I can either move people into this building over here, which is sort of in the path, or we can go out past the ball pits and out past the volleyball nets and just continue to get as far away as possible. So they should have that latitude in their training and in their program.
Okay, so we're keeping kids under the supervision of the adult staff, together, quiet, and either moving away or hidden from view. Is there any appropriate time or circumstance where scatter is better, or what people should do? Would staff have the flexibility to say scatter? Is that something?
It depends on the type of incident and where you are with your campers when the incident goes down, when the incident occurs. If you're out on a softball field that is very far away from the dining hall where this person was spotted, stay out in that area. Don't come back into the camp to see what's going on. Move into an area where you are away from the emergency, away from the situation, and wait until you receive the all clear to come back into the campus formally. Count noses, make sure you got all the kids you're supposed to. If you got a younger group of kids, you kind of have to gather them as a little flock and move them away and keep them safe in that manner. If you got older kids, teenagers, people like that, again, they've been exposed to these things on the news and in school, they will be able to work sort of in a cooperative manner with the counselors to go into another area. And they may need to help some other people that are coming towards them with a group of small children. Again, have your plan be flexible, that it adapts to the situation. I think that's what, that's what the takeaway is here. One
of the questions that that's submitted from Rebecca Rothman, how about 3 to 5 year olds? How would they react to lockdown drills as they haven't done them in school yet? How can you be upfront with the older kids, or maybe use a hide and seek analogy with the younger kids? And we just have about 5 minutes left, but I'll weigh in on that from my perspective, and then I'd like to hear yours with real little kids. And I suppose younger than 3, we're carrying them, and they don't need to even know it's a drill. But I would say, Rebecca, I don't want to confuse something that is as serious as Lee and I are talking about today, and all of you are participating in, with a game. So I wouldn't call lockdown drill hide and seek. But by the same token, referencing what I said earlier, you want to be sensitive to the developmental level of your young participants. So, I certainly think it would be appropriate to say, if there is, even thinking of 3-year-olds, let's really simplify it. If we need to be safe, we're going to move to this room and turn off the lights and be as quiet as we can. 3-year-olds don't need much more of an explanation than that. And again, I wouldn't frame it as we're playing hide and seek for a whole bunch of reasons. 5-year-olds, you could say, if something unsafe was going on the other side of the building or the other side of the field, it would be the grown-ups' job to make sure that we were away from that. So maybe somebody is doing something that's not okay, or maybe there was a fire or a piece of equipment that wasn't safe. We're going to move to a different part of camp, and the grown-ups are going to help keep you safe. I think framing it that way in terms of safety and the common sense, even for a 5-year-old, of not approaching it despite their curiosity, but avoiding it with the adults there to shepherd them. You probably have something to add to that.
You're absolutely right. The age of the kids that you're dealing with, the age of your campers, will kind of dictate how you move them, what you impart to them when you're training them. If it is a situation where, if this happens, you're going to look to me, you're going to come to me, this is what we are going to do. Right. I think that works better than sort of, imparting it to the kids where, hey, something bad happens, you might kind of have to be on your own and go over here. Yeah. Bring them into the fold and shepherd them a little bit. I can tell you that from my experience, when the troops show up, when fire and EMS and police show up, people are curious. Kids are curious. You may have to restrain them or keep them from coming into the emergency situation until it's safe. The fire apparatus is, it's a magnet. It's very interesting. The guys are all good looking in their helmets. And
it's important, as we said, to have some Q&A prior to announcing after you announce a drill, but prior to running it, as well as afterwards. And some of that Q&A, if the firefighters or paramedics or police are willing to stay around, might be for a group of 4 or 5-year-olds, or 6 or 7 or 12-year-olds, to meet some of those men and women, to get to touch their oxygen tank or have some piece of equipment explained. Another question is from Kate Goosey, and she wants to know, when we're talking about grouping people and the advantage of turning off lights, if possible, locking doors, being in a dark corner is better than being running around in the open if you have an intruder who intends to do harm to kids. What are the circumstances where you would want people in sort of subgroups versus one large group? Because you did mention like a rendezvous point, and I can see some logic to look, in the way we train our staff. You're down in the waterfront, here's the place where you should huddle. if you're, near the storm shelter, which is near uh, the pasture or the baseball field, this is where you should go. And if you're on the bike trails, there isn't a building or a central place, but we would want you to stay together off the trail. I'm guessing you wouldn't want those disparate groups to all be congregating, say, at the main lodge, but maybe there's another parameter that would help answer Kate's question.
Sure. No, you're correct, Chris. In emergency planning, fire drills, lockdown drills, things like this, you'll always have a rally point. When you are seeing people leave a building during a fire drill, we do it at the office building that I work at. That's 400 people. Yeah. We leave from wherever we are as quickly as possible, but we are expected to show up at certain points in the parking lot out and away from the building so that management can count noses and make sure everyone is out of the building. As you roll up on a piece of fire apparatus, if someone comes up to you and says, everyone's out of the building, okay, that tells me someone has run a little program and gotten folks out. I'm still going to search. I'm still going to look for anybody that was left behind or chose not to leave. But it's nice to know that they had enough initiative to form a plan and have a program for fire evacuation. The same thing holds true for these active shooter and lockdown drills, that when you have people leaving a certain area, you want them to, at some point, come back to a rally point so that you know where they are. I think that's important.
All right. Well, thank you. I regret that we're out of time. 45 minutes goes by in a flash, but you've provided a tremendous amount of valuable information, and you're, a living testament to the fact that, insurance companies and the folks who work with them are tremendously interested in promoting safe practices and preparedness and prevention of accidents or injuries. So for all of you attending the webinar live today, or anyone who is watching the recording, in addition to forming a relationship with local emergency services, police, fire, EMS, in addition to querying any facilities that you might use, whether it's a beach or a park, you should also be in touch with your insurance agent so that you are privy to their risk management perspective. And you might be lucky enough to have someone like Lee visit your facility, do an audit, make some suggestions on how you refine your plan. I think the most important thing that Scott and Sarah say in the expert online training video, lockdown drills, is that having a plan is very different from practicing the plan. And when you're teaching staff, and we've emphasized during this webinar how important that component of on-site training is, it might go very smoothly during staff training week, but if you're not practicing it with the participants, and again, with appropriate explanation and Q&A and sensitivity to their developmental level, you really don't know whether it's going to work. You might even be able to invite some EMS personnel to your site when your program is in session, let them watch and give you some feedback when it's over. And yes, that takes time. And no, it's not as much fun as every other activity that you have. But it's essential to be prepared. And, people have drawn a lot of similarities between other kinds of evacuation, drills. As you pointed out at the beginning, Lee, kids have participated in things like this before, unless they're really young kids. And it's important for them to see, how is it different at camp or my summer youth program compared to school? At the end of the day, we're doing all kinds of things to prepare for highly unusual, unlikely scenarios like CPR or a lost bather drill, a fire drill we've talked about. But that's a huge responsibility, an essential responsibility that we all have, both to get the training and then, as Scott and Sarah emphasize, to practice it.
Chris, you're absolutely right. A plan that is not practice will not show you the flaws in your plan.
Yeah.
Having that outside set of eyes looking over your plan is always helpful. And we as an insurance company, we want you to be successful, because if you're successful, we're successful. We want you to be able to do your job of having the best possible experience for the campers that are coming to your facilities, coming to your camps and youth programs, that they go home with the same 10 fingers and 10 toes they showed up with and have a great experience. But if something does happen, that you as a camp are prepared to react to it.
Yeah.
We want you to be successful. We love the camp business. It's great for us. I thought the Experts Online Training module was excellent in this regard. It truly was.
Well, thank you. I really appreciate it. That's a wonderful positive note to end on. Might I share your email with participants if they wanted to be in touch with you, either with follow-up questions or to ask about what they should be looking for in a policy or something like that?
I'm not an insurance policy person, but yeah, you can certainly do that, and I'll direct him to the right person. There's no
great.
question.
So lee.geiling@kandkinsurance.com.
That's correct.
All right, fantastic. So I'll put that in the chat room. I've said it out loud, so it'll be on the recording, and I'll put it in text in the version of this that will go up on expertonlinetraining.com. So listen, Lee, I'm so grateful for your expertise, for all that you do for camps around the country. Everyone should be so lucky as to have you visit. I'm personally enormously grateful that you served as a special consultant for us on this video, which I'm sure as we learn more, we'll also be updating. But I encourage people who attended the webinar, you have free access to lockdown drills hosted by Scott Arizala and Sarah Kurtz-McKinnon, just two of our amazing faculty of 27 experts that are the backbone of EOT. We hope that this video, as well as the other 149 educational video training modules that we have on expertonlinetraining.com, can not only reduce injuries and illnesses at your summer youth program, but to Lee's point, really enrich the lives of the staff who work there or volunteer there and the young people who attend. So on behalf of Expert Online Training, I'm Dr. Chris Thurber, wishing everyone an awesome Thanksgiving holiday if you celebrate Thanksgiving, and otherwise the weekend if you get some of that off. So thank you so much for joining us today, and we look forward to seeing you next month on the EOT webinar series. All right, take care. Thank you, Lee. Bye-bye.